You are listening to your New Puppies Podcast, starting you and your dog off on the right paw. Here's your host, Debbie Salento.
Hello and welcome. I'm Debbie, and this is episode 12 of Your New Puppies Podcast. And at the time of this recording, it's about the middle of September, which means school is back in. So I thought it'd be appropriate to talk about you and your dog's obedience training. So I'm essentially going to talk about the basic obedience. So like where you start, the sit, down, stay, come. If you plan on going way beyond that to some advanced training, maybe it's therapy training or even competition training, or if it's just something you enjoy doing, that's fantastic. It's still going to relate, but if you're in that place with your dog, then you probably already know what I'm going to talk about. You can find basic obedience classes everywhere, and they're popular for very good reasons. Just about any pet professional out there, from, of course, trainers to vets to pet sitters to rescue workers, they recommend it. Because really, when it comes down to it, there is no downside, but there are a ton of upsides. I mean, I could sit here all day listing all the reasons why you and your dog should do some kind of basic obedience. And yes, it does cost money, because I do highly recommend that you work with a trainer in some way. So you can go to a group class, you can do private lessons. There are even options online now, which is actually something I'm working on, but we're going to talk about that at a later date. So the first thing that comes to mind is that you're going to learn these commands in class and then be able to use them directly at home. For example, your dog has to sit before he gets to go outside, or has to sit when he greets people because if his butt's on the floor, he's not jumping. Or maybe he has to do a sit and stay before he gets his meals. So you're able to enforce some boundaries, enforce some rules, directly using these commands. I mean, the come command, your recall command, it's the most important because it could save your dog's life one day. And if you have a smart and or active dog, this type of training is so essential, because these smart dogs get bored really easily. So they need that kind of mental stimulation and outlet, or else when they do get bored, they make their own decisions on what to do, which usually means digging a hole in the backyard or barking out the window incessantly or barking at you. And it's also a form of mental exercise. So we always talk about the physical exercise and taking your dog for walks, but this type of training also gives them that mental exercise that is just as important. And it's a great supplement, especially if you have a very high energy dog. I know that when I go to my private sessions and I work with the dog and I work with the owner, the dog is usually dead asleep by the end of the session, because even though we may not have physically done much, that mental exercise is just priceless. So what I really want to talk about today is, in my opinion, the most important part of your basic obedience training. And that's the bond and the relationship that you're developing with your dog. And I'll explain what I mean. So when you're going through a basic obedience class, whether it's private sessions, the group class, online, whatever it is, you're creating a foundation that's gonna affect all your training to come. So learning the actual commands, learning what sit means, learning what come means, that's only half the story. The other half is developing the relationship with the person giving the commands. So that's why every member in the family also has to participate. So if you've ever had a dog or know somebody who's had a dog, that there was one member in the family that they listened to. So we obviously knew what the rules were, obviously knew what their commands were, but there was only one person they listened to. Everybody else was kind of selective listening. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Just because the dog knows what he's supposed to do doesn't mean he's gonna do it. You have to have the relationship and the knowledge. You can't have one without the other to get your well-behaved dog. Okay, so how are you doing this? Like, what is happening? So if you think about it, your dog is learning that when he listens to you, good things happen, right? So if he sits, he gets a treat, or he gets praise, or he gets to go outside. And now he's developing this good association of listening to you, even if it's just, it made you happy. Never underestimate a dog's desire to please their owner. So now you're starting to develop that relationship where your dog's going to look to you for guidance. So beyond his commands, beyond his training, he's going to be like, all right, well, when I listen to this human over here, good things happen. So human, what do you want me to do? You're also going to learn each other's quirks because every dog is different and every human's different. So every dog-human relationship is going to be different. So your dog is not only listening to you and listening for the words that he knows, but he's also watching you and watching your body language. And you're also learning the same things from him, whether you realize it or not. For example, my dog Mariah, she is like one of those dogs, she's just built for obedience. She's part German Shepherd and she's super smart and super eager to please. Now, when I was training her, I could not for the life of me get her to stay in a down. She would go down, but then she would pop right back up. Like, unless I leaned over her, she would sit right back up. And I really struggled with this until one day I put the treats away. I did not have any treats on me, any treats in sight. And wouldn't you know it, I told her down, she went down and just stayed there and looked at me. She was so distracted by the presence of the treats that she was only half listening to me. So now I don't even train her with treats. She's so eager to please. She's so happy with just my praise that works. Like maybe I'll need to use the treat to lure her to actually teach her what I need from her, but that's it. Then they go away. I don't even phase them out, but it took me doing that training to learn that about her. So this is why every single dog and every single dog owner should go through some form of obedience training together. And I truly feel that if you approach it as a relationship builder and not just going through the motions of the obedience, because you're going to get the most out of it and you're going to create something, you're going to create the foundation of any kind of training you want to do with your dogs, whether it's just manners or advanced basic obedience, house rules, any of that. All of that still takes work, don't get me wrong, but it's going to be much easier once you build that relationship. Okay, so basic obedience is like learning the ABCs of training. Okay, so now that I've convinced you to run out and find your closest obedience class, how do you do that? How do you find a trainer? How do you find a good class? Well, the best way to do that usually is to ask your friends, to ask for recommendations. You're also going to want to look at what you're actually going to learn. Just about any basic obedience class is going to have, sit, down, stay, and come. Those are like the 4 main ones. And then you'll learn other things, and that's usually at the discretion of the trainer and what they feel is important. So that can vary. So if you have specific priorities, you might want to look into that. Also, don't be afraid to call the trainer. If the trainer doesn't want to answer your questions or not talk to you, then move on and ask them questions. Ask them, what their training style is, what equipment they use. And that can really help you determine if this is the path you want to take. Also, what you're going to notice is a lot of the basic obedience classes, there's an age limit. Usually it's 5 to 6 months and older. That doesn't mean that you can't start sooner with a puppy that's younger than 5 months. There's a lot of puppy classes out there too, but their priority is socialization. And it should be, because if your dog's under 5 months, your priority should be socialization. That doesn't mean you can't start with a little bit of basic obedience. The biggest difference is their attention span. They're not going to be able to go into a class for an hour and learn how to sit, heel, stay. They're just not going to put up with that. So you just do shorter little sessions when you're starting with a young dog. instead of a 10-minute session, you're doing 3 to 5 minute sessions, and then socialize the heck out of them because that is the most important. And then when they get to 5 or 6 months, then you start the basic obedience and you get a little bit more serious about that. And of course, you're going to have to find a class, usually they're weekly, that fits into your schedule because it's really important for you to get to the class because the class is for you. It's not for the dog. It is for you. It's for you to check in with the trainer, to make sure if you have any questions or have the trainer, make any kind of adjustments that you need. So then you can go home and make those adjustments. Because a class is actually a really hard place for the dog to learn the commands. It's such a high level of distraction that you don't go into the class hoping that, at the end of the hour, my dog's going to know sit. No, that work has to be done at home. Okay, that's all I have for you today. So if you want to go to the show notes, it's playtimepause.com/episode 12. So it's www.playtimepause.com/episode 12. Leave a comment. Let me know what your experience with obedience classes is. Give me your stories. I'd love, love, love to hear them. And of course, ask me any questions that you have. All right, until next time, bye for now.
Thank you for listening to your New Puppies podcast. Learn more about us at playtimepause.com.